Where do you go to learn about banana splits? Sunday school! So Manasseh, who we've been talking about for the last few days, his story takes an interesting turn. What happens in Israel, we learn through all the stories of the kings, is that they were often at war. There's lots of fighting in the Old Testament. And Manasseh's story isn't any different. The problem is because Manasseh was not choosing to honor God, he had to fight these battles without God's blessing. Hezekiah experienced a lot of protection because he honored God. Manasseh did not have the protection of God. What's super interesting is because God loved Manasseh and he loved the people of Israel, God still was trying to get Manasseh's attention even though Manasseh was not honoring him. This brings us to today's big idea. Jesus is the only way back to God. While Jesus came a long time after Manasseh, because we have a new king, we have Jesus to bring us back to God. But let's take a look at how God tried to get Manasseh's attention and hear what happens. Today we're back in the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 33, and we're reading verses 10 to 13. For those of you that haven't spent a lot of time in the Bible, those verse numbers are the little numbers that are squished into all the words. That should help you find it a little bit easier. So beginning at chapter 10, the Bible says, the Lord spoke to Manasseh. Imagine, even though Manasseh wasn't talking to God and was choosing not to honor God, the Lord still spoke to him because he loved him. The Lord spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they didn't pay any attention to him. So the Lord brought the army commanders from the king of Assyria, those are the bad guys, against him. They took Manasseh as a prisoner. They put a hook in his nose. What? They put him in bronze chains and they took him to Babylon. Not a great place. When Manasseh was in trouble, he asked the Lord his God to help him. He made himself very humble in the sight of the God of his people. God was always with Israel. Manasseh prayed to him. When he did, the Lord felt sorry for him because he loved him. He answered his prayer. The Lord brought Manasseh back to Jerusalem and his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord is God. Let me read that last part one more time. Manasseh prayed to him, and when he did, the Lord felt sorry for him. He answered his prayer. The Lord brought Manasseh back to Jerusalem and his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord is God. What's cool about this, and what we know to be true because we have the whole story, is that most kings that were taken prisoner would die in prison. It's very rare that a king would get released. If you can imagine two strong armies fighting against each other, of course they want to take the other king prisoner. What good would it be to set that king free? That's like a trophy when they would capture the king. Think about it in terms of a game of chess. When you knock down someone else's king in the game of chess, the game is over and that other kingdom falls. The truth about the kingdom of Israel is that they were always God's chosen people, and God always provided a way back to himself. Because Manasseh humbled himself, the Lord felt sorry for him and he answered his prayer to be freed. And just like that, even with a hook in his nose, Manasseh was set free. Well, we don't serve Manasseh as king anymore. We serve Jesus as king. And Jesus is the only way back to God. What we know to be true about God's kingdom is that God has always provided a way back to himself. When you say yes to Jesus, you get full access to a loving, caring God. Sometimes we make choices that make us feel trapped. Sometimes we make bad choices and they isolate us from people. They make us feel alone or scared, or maybe they make us feel really sorry for the choices that we've made. God's gift to us through Jesus is forgiveness. When we choose forgiveness, when we say sorry for what we have done, we know as Christ followers that God provides the same easy way back to Him. All Manasseh had to do was pray. That's still true today. When you pray and ask God for forgiveness, He still gives you a way back to Him. It's just as easy as a prayer. When you say sorry to God and you ask for His forgiveness when you've made a bad choice, you always get Jesus. Jesus is the only way back to God.